in round 11. It's Jan-Krzysztof Duda who's been struggling this tournament. Only 9 points so far against Anish Giri, winning 2 games in a row so far today. On fire with great air quality, probably. What's happening in this game, David?
OK, still early days in this game. We're jumping in just after the opening, so we haven't missed much. This, for viewers at home who are keen on opening names, this was the Regauzing Defense, I believe. So we've seen a trade of a couple of pieces so far. The pawn structure, however, is slightly imbalanced. So White has an extra pawn in the middle of the board. If you look at the 2 central files, the E and the D files, White has 2 pawns there, Black only has 1. So in these types of positions, White long-term has a small advantage, but currently Black is well centralized, Black is well developed, Rook's connected, everything else pretty much balanced. So early days, it's just going to be about who understands the position better, who can, again, initiate that action in a favorable way. And, OK, Anish starts with a mysterious rook move, planting his rook behind one of his own pawns. This is something we normally never, ever recommend. Rooks want to be on open files. But I guess Black's idea is to move the Black knight out of the way and then push the pawn in front of that Black rook that has just moved. And he will hope to open things up in that fashion. That is Black's plan over the next 3 or 4 moves.
It's a very clever move, right? Because it's kind of also anticipating what Duda is going to be doing, which is this pawn break. You know, he's saying, yep, I'm going to open up this line. And Anish is just going, yeah, I'm going to be ready. Because you see that pawn that is that the rook is looking at, that is a target.
Yeah, I must admit, I don't like the move by Black at all. I mean, I understand the point behind it. I think it's clever, this rook move, because you want to, as mentioned, move this knight out the way, and once this bishop retreats, then you push this pawn forward, and suddenly rooks opposite enemy queens. It can be very effective. White's queen unhappy here. But the reason I don't like it, Ivanka, is because this move, the bishop can land on this square, hitting the Black rook, and you have to move it again. You have to lose time. This rook's already moved once, 2 moves ago, has to move again. And, OK, maybe this position is still fine for Black, but you've lost time, and I hate losing time in my games. So right now, that is the dilemma facing Anish Giri. Can he push this pawn forward? He has moved his knight, actually, so he is destined to lose time against his rook because this bishop's going to attack it. And if you have to move it again, now White can maybe start centralizing rooks. White can maybe just step the queen forward 1 square, step the pawn forward. White has 1 extra move compared to a position he could otherwise have got. So, yeah, very strange maneuver there by Anish Giri. And he has indeed moved his rook for a 2nd time in a few moves.
Wow. Well, Anish Giri, he has had a good day so far. These are the standings after 10 rounds out of 15 in the preliminaries. Jan Nepomniachtchi on top with incredible 23 points. We also see then Vladislav Artemyev in 8th place, currently qualified for the knockout stage, but Levon Aronian currently outside, and so is Jan-Krzysztof Duda, who has struggled a little bit so far this tournament. Anish Giri, he has a very good day today, currently now in 2nd place. Must be the air quality today for Anish Giri.
Yeah, so I think this includes the result we just saw between Magnus Carlsen and Ding. So imagine if Levon Aronian in 9th place, he's in great form in general. If he wins, he will leapfrog both those players in 5th and 7th place. If Vladislav Artemyev in 8th wins, he will leapfrog them as well. So Magnus, Ding, not feeling safe at all.
Oh.
They really need to up their game in the next few rounds.
Yeah, it's a strange, a little bit of a strange day. Something going on maybe with Magnus Carlsen. He has been down with COVID. That could definitely be a reason why he needed a little bit of a break now before round 12, final round of today. That will start in 50 minutes. But first, we're going to follow all the action here in round 11. Both players leaning back, looking at the board. Is this a tense position?
It is quite a tense position, and actually, I realised there was quite a big threat. There was a trap that Anish Giri had set, one that I would maybe have fallen into. If we just go into the position briefly, we can see that Anish Giri, as Black, did have a sneaky idea. So White's most natural move, maybe most logical move, would be to improve one of these 2 rooks. They're not doing anything. Every other piece is moved and is active. But if you move one of these rooks, for example, if you activate this rook, swinging it across, attacking this pawn with the queen and the rook now, then black would have pushed a pawn forward and trapped this white bishop on the edge of the board. There's no retreat now for this bishop. This pawn is protected by black's bishop, and the queen will win this bishop on the next turn. So very, very sneaky idea. That is why you always got to consider your opponent's threats. First thing you look for in any position. If your opponent doesn't have a threat, then you can kind of continue with your plans. So this move is what Duda wanted to play, but it wasn't possible. So he lifted up his queen, and now black's move isn't possible. If the pawn pushes, now it would lose protection of the knight. White would simply win a piece. So very clever play by both sides. And yeah, let's go back to the players. I expect to see white now centralize the rooks if possible. And I do prefer white's position because level pawns, but white has extra pawns in the middle of the board. And compared to flank pawns on either side, central pawns are more important in the middle game, especially while queens are on the board.
All right. After that quick draw, I'm feeling a little bit down. So I have a little bit of a negative question because we keep talking about the importance of great air quality. You know, you can think faster, you can think better. How bad can it go if you have really bad air quality? And I mean, like, is it deadly?
If you want to talk about death, yeah, you could end up there, but there's definitely a long path.
That's good to hear.
There.
Yeah.
Long term, we do know that things like radon have a big impact. Could lead to pneumonia, cancer, a lot of things in worst cases. So, but I mean, first thing is to actually monitor the air.
Yeah.
Why worry until you actually know that the indoor air is bad, but high levels of particulates, like particles in the air, radon, those are kind of things, chemicals in the air that actually goes into your body and out to your bloodstream, and thereby could impact your overall health.
Yeah.
For sure.
I, for example, love lighting candles. You know, dark Norway. It's so nice. You know, in a night I can light 20 candles all over my apartment. And that must be kind of bad.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah, I know. Ugh.
I'm sorry to say that.
Yeah.
What about not candles, but the scent diffusers? You know?
It's the same thing.
Really?
Yep.
No.
Because you're releasing things in the air, right? So it's still the same concept, unfortunately. Which is why when you work with indoor air quality, like I do, all the lights at home is electric. Even the candle ones are electric. So you get a bit paranoid if you work in the industry.
I can imagine. What was like when you started working with Airthings? What sort of things did you change in your home environment?
I think the first of all was just to be very, very, very paranoid in general and make sure that we have fresh air all the time. So when we looked to buying a house, it was super important to have balanced ventilation to bring in. That was like the number one criteria. Like schools for the kids, all that other stuff, not important. We need good air in the house.
Windows to open and just balanced air. Is it better with the newer buildings rather than buying an older house?
It's better with newer buildings if you have balanced ventilation, because that's one of the things, right? Some people have heard about sick building syndrome, which means that you build more airtight buildings, houses, so you don't actually, you don't get rid of all the indoor chemicals, which is why ventilation is super important. So there was a time when, we modernized, we got more airtight buildings, but the ventilation, the capability of getting fresh air in wasn't the top priority. So new houses, new buildings with proper ventilation, that's the best.
Okay. Well, my apartment is quite new, so I'm glad to hear that, even if I light a lot of candles.
I live in an old house. But aren't they meant to breathe?
But old houses do breathe, so that's the difference. So you do have small cracks, small openings, energy leakage, but you do get some natural ventilation, which is same for cabins and things like that as well.
Yeah. Bad news in a storm, though. The whole building shakes.
All right. I do hear some moves coming out, David. What's happening on the board?
So a few moves, but nothing too special has happened. White now just jumping forward with the knight, trying to attack one of the black pawns. And Jovanka, whose position do you prefer? Personally, I slightly prefer white's, but you could make an argument for both sides here.
White has the centre. I'm a big fan of that. But I do like Anish's last move, which was also my instinct, which is just to centralise the bishop and just to lengthen the scope of its diagonal. Look at where it's pointing to. It's pointing towards the white king. And now it's going to be a question for Duda. How does he deal with this active piece? Does he take measures to kick that bishop back, or is he perhaps just going to play around that bishop's magnificence and do something else?
Yeah, that is a big question. That's the pressing question for Duda right now. And Duda is not in form. He hasn't won in the last 2 days. So he will be slightly worried about any potential attack against his king. Often, if you're not in great form, you start to see ghosts. You start to overprotect your king or start to worry a bit too much about your opponent's ideas. And you could imagine, for example, the black queen starting to line up against the white king, and suddenly it would be disastrous. So for sure, some of those ideas in mind about trying to eliminate this black bishop, you can do that in 2 ways. One, which is a bit loose, a bit risky, but could be very effective, would be to push this pawn forward. Next, trying to push another pawn forward, trying to create that strong pawn centre. For example, if black just moves, you could push again forward, attacking this bishop. But the problem is, once this bishop moves, there are a few squares for it, protected now by the black knight. Now, these pawns are a bit loose, especially this guy in the centre. It's attacked twice by black's queen and by the rook behind it, and it's not so easy to defend. So this one has pros and cons, pushing white's pawns forward. That's the problem with pawns. They don't step backwards, and they never cover squares that they lose track of. I was about to say the second way to get rid of this bishop is to trade it off with a piece rather than attack it with a pawn. And Duda is going to try and do that. He's retreated his knight. That knight looked very nice and pretty in the centre, but now his idea is that, for example, if black swings the queen across, threatening a checkmate against this square, using the queen and bishop together, then white can solve that problem and go on the attack at the same time, defend and attack, hitting this queen now with the knight, hitting the bishop, but more importantly, defending this square as well. And now, next move, once the black queen runs from this attack, you're guaranteed to eliminate black's best piece. And if this piece disappears, black is left with a rather sad knight on the edge of the board. And actually, if this happens, for example, a trade here, this knight is simply destined to stay on the edge of the board for probably the rest of the game. It's that bad a piece. It's actually dominated by white's bishop and white's queen. There's nowhere really safe for this knight to go. So that is Duda's plan. He wants to relocate his knight round and eliminate the black bishop. Takes a while, but it will be very effective if he can make it happen.
Yeah. And what's quite nice is that the queen is located on that c3 square, because black really wants to trap that bishop that's sitting there all by itself. But as long as the queen is sitting on that particular dark square, black cannot push the desirable b6, b5 pawn.
Yeah, white's queen just keeping an eye on that black knight. And yeah, it's a very tense position. This one, despite the computer saying 0.1 being roughly in the middle, all three results possible, anything can happen. It just means that there's chances for both sides right now. And Anish leaning forward, slightly low on the clock as well. You can tell he's not entirely happy with his position. I also saw Anish, those CO2 levels, oof, they've been rising a lot today, throughout the day.
And talking about CO2 levels, Moy Reach on Twitter says, well, on a selfie, that Airthings is giving him there in Aberdeen the green light.
Ooh.
And they also want to see the return of the original Play Magnus chess set. They want to buy it.
Ah, the plastic black and white one.
Exactly.
That's very nice.
It's very, very nice, and it's very, very popular on social media.
Yeah, yeah. They are very nice. They're easy to carry around. Yeah, look at that.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Green light, and it's a wave as well. This is the magic one where you just wave at it and everything is okay. And we do have a move from Anish. He's just developed his rook, pointing it on a semi-open line. And also we got a big hello from Kelvin, who is watching from Kenya.
Ah,
That's so cool that everyone is watching from different parts of the world. And he also says that he loves our commentary.
thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you, yeah.
We really love having you with us.
And if you too want to share your selfies, you want to send us any questions or any questions about chess or even about air quality, because we're very lucky to have Joachim here on hand to help us, then you can tweet us using the hashtag ChessChamps.
Definitely. Do that, everyone. And we have something else to say to you as well that you should do. You can. We've launched something called tour badges this season. So for every tournament, there's going to be a new badge, and with every badge comes loads of perks that you can gather. So if you go into Chess24 the /tour/badges, you can read more about this and start collecting those badges, which is very cool. Imagine to have all 9 badges. Have you collected them yet, David?
These badges?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Because you're commentating, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But maybe when I go home later, I'll collect them. But no, I'm loyal to Pokemon cards. Those are the only things I've got.
Yeah. Did you collect that?
I did.
Yeah,
I was
did
obsessed.
too. Yeah. I also collected Spice Girls photos. And did you have the Pogs in England?
Pogs, yeah.
Yeah, I love the Pogs.
Okay, so anyone at home with a penchant for collecting things? Yeah, now's your chance.
What did you collect, Joachim?
I had the Spice Girls photos as
Did
well.
you? It's a Scandinavian thing, probably, then.
Probably.
Yeah.
Very much likely.
With the album, and then you could buy a new... I bought a new package of photos every Saturday. I got like 20 kroners to go buy a package of
I
photos.
still have them.
Do you?
Yeah, I might sell them and get the pension money at some point.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be worth loads of money.
Well, some Pokemon cards are. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. It feels like this game is a little bit slow so far, David. Will it explode at some point?
Yeah, we're still waiting for that moment, that Braveheart moment, for the game to explode. There is currently a threat in the position. Black's knight has just jumped in, attacking one of the white rooks. So I feel like maybe Giri is trying to be the more ambitious of the two right now. That being said, Duda can just move that rook. There are plenty of safe squares, and I don't think there will be too much to worry about for him, not too much damage to the white position. And this is why you always want a strong center as white or as either color, because even if things go wrong, if you have a strong center like this that white has, you won't be in too much danger. So we saw this knight attack the rook, and now the rook has just sidestepped one square. And this is quite an instructive moment. I don't think greed is good here. Black can actually go and grab a pawn. This pawn is isolated. It's social distancing, very much so, from the rest of its pawns. But if Black gets greedy and grabs it, then it would be disastrous. For example, okay, this hasn't happened. I got a heart attack for a moment that Giri had made this blunder, but the white knight could now just jump forward, defending this bishop, but more importantly, removing the defender, this bishop now, of Black's knight. And look at these two pieces. This queen is pretty much trapped, ready to be picked off maybe by a white rook later, and also this is a deadly pin. The black knight cannot move because the queen would drop behind it. So greed sometimes is not good. And Anish Giri has played a tricky move. He pushed his pawn forward. And the idea is now that if rook takes knight, we keep coming up on this theme. Now, if we saw a trade here, it would be bishop and knight in exchange for a rook. The bishop and knight would be better. But Anish has a trick in mind. After rook takes knight on this square, pawn takes pawn would be a bit annoying, because now the queen needs to defend its rook. And if you take this pawn back with your pawn instead, then there might be some trouble. Rook takes rook, and suddenly some back rank checks against white's king, which doesn't have much breathing space. You have to take back with the knight. And after a trade on this square, I know this is a lot of moves, but at the very end, we see, yes, it's still bishop and knight for a rook, but now it's easier for black to play because the rook and queen connect, but these two pieces are so far away from each other, they will struggle to coordinate, and I think black would be fine in this position. So, yeah, complicated stuff. Tricky from Anish. This pawn push has initiated the action we wanted, but will Duda allow it?
So how many steps did you go there? I mean, you did some strategic, very many moves ahead.
Yeah, that's the thing. Actually, we talk about calculation in chess, like looking forward, trying to work out my move, then my opponent's move, then my move, my opponent's move. And it's easier to do when it's all forcing. So if I just walk through that again very, very slowly. So here, it's a capture, which is one of the most forcing moves in chess. Apart from a check, it's the most forcing. Then it's another capture and a threat. And then it's another capture. And then it's another capture. So every move is forced. There's no options for either side. So it's easier to work out. I mean, some positions, there's 5 options for white, 5 replies for black. Here, everything is forced. And now black has to take this rook, otherwise you're a piece down. White has to recapture, otherwise white is down material. Now black has to capture this pawn. I mean, it's a free pawn. And we're actually maybe heading in this direction. So this To answer your question was, this to answer your question was 4 moves each so 8 moves in total ahead, but the players, they're capable, and this is about to happen on the board. They're capable of finding this type of thing. So a long variation, we often say, is a wrong variation. You don't want to calculate too far ahead unnecessarily, especially if there's lots of branches, lots of alternatives, but sometimes play can be very forcing.
But at some point, these forcing moves will be over. I guess we're here now. So now what?
Now what? That's the question. Now it's no longer forced. Now both sides have options again. So that's where I would stop my calculation if I'm looking in advance.
Yeah. And in this position, we would try to have it in our mind's eye. And then we would try to evaluate. And all those things that David was talking about, the combination of bishop and knight, would they be working well? And what about your opponent's rook? How valuable is that? And then take a look at the pawn structure that Anish Giri has. He has, if you look at one of his pawns, it's unchallenged. It's a 2 versus 1 pawn majority. And that means there's a potential to create a passed pawn. Can these 2 pieces that Duda has, can they hold off that rook and that pawn? And that's the kind of the questions that we would ask ourselves. It's kind of like step back and look at the view. So we've kind of gone into the whole kind of calculations, gone into that deep, dark forest, come out of it, take back, look at the view. And Duda took a look at it and he goes, yeah, I think this is fine. Giri, I think he's looking quite positive, actually, from my reading of his body language. He looks like, yep, OK, he's in the zone. He thinks that he has the chances to push.
Cool. Anish Giri, he is on fire today. He has won 2 games so far. Jan-Krzysztof Duda has struggled in this tournament, but Jan-Krzysztof Duda, he won the World Cup about 6 months ago and is ready for the candidates. Anish Giri, what chances do you give him to qualify for the candidates? Not many spots left. Not many spots left.
But Anish Giri, he didn't take part in the first Grand Prix event, so he's got 2 Grand Prix events. If he does well in both, he'll qualify. It's not easy, though, in those types of knockout tournaments. It becomes a bit of a lottery. Everyone is so good. One bad game, and your chances could be gone. So Anish, he's been in training mode. He's mentioned it on Twitter. He loves to tweet. And he's ready. He wants this chance at the World Championship. But look at this last move. He's offered now a trade of queens. And I think white should try to avoid that at all costs. If you trade the queens off the board, then suddenly black's 2 versus 1 majority in terms of pawns that Jovanka mentioned, that will become maybe the biggest factor in the position. The white knight and the white bishop, they are starting to combine now, near each other at least, but they will struggle to stop black's pawns if they are not assisted by a queen. So that's why white keeps the queens on the board. Often if you have a kind of diagonal piece like a bishop, a kind of tricky piece like a knight, you need a lateral piece, a piece which controls files and lines like a queen, like a rook, in order to make them kind of achieve their full potential. So if you just have a knight and bishop alone, they can struggle against a rook. But if you have a queen, if you have a rook, they can be fantastic pieces later in the game.
Yeah.
And now it's harder for black to push those 2 pawns forward. White's queen will stop them.
And I just wanted to kind of elaborate a little bit on David's point with the bishop and the knight. OK, so Anish is insistent that he wants to swap off those queens. And this bishop and a knight, they work well as attacking pieces. So because of the colour of the bishop, it's light squares, the knight and the bishop are forced to attack on the light squares. So they're going to work together, and ideally to get a mating attack, or they will need to work with the queen. So a dream scenario for Duda would be if he somehow manages to launch Harry up the board, fix those light squares around the king, and somehow somehow kind of like improve the diagonal of the bishop and introduce a mating attack towards the king. And it's just light squares. Just think of something happening on the light squares, and that's the dream. There you can see David's highlighted it.
That's definitely one of the plans long-term if Duda can achieve it. But it does take a while. First, you need 1 move to get your queen out of the possible trade, and then you need black to maybe do nothing. And then, as you mentioned, Jovanka, you need to create some space for your king, maybe launching this pawn up the board so that the king can breathe, some fresh air. And then you need to move your bishop out the way. But at the moment, the queen is a bit overstretched. She has to defend her knight at the bottom of the board. She has to avoid any possible trades. We could well see a scenario where this queen just kind of lifts her skirts and runs away, but she gets challenged every time. The black queen will follow her around the board, and the queen and rook teaming up. Remember, the trades favour black, so wherever the white queen goes, black will follow. Wherever the white queen retreats, black will follow. And it's not clear where the queen will escape to without allowing that trade.
So you think it's going to be a draw just by this queen dance? Black is going to say, swap queens, white's going to say no, and the dance will continue until the end of time.
Struggling to see what else white can do, simply. So after this queen move, I think Anish has found a great defensive motif. Note how the white bishop as well cuts off the black pawns from advancing, so black has nothing else to do except for play this kind of chasing game of the queens. So, yeah, Duda, he'll be looking for ways to keep the queens alive. OK, he does go to this square, lining it up on the light squares, possibly. But black, I'm pretty sure, is going to chase that queen with his own queen. You can go back to this square to try and challenge. You can also go back maybe to this square and try and challenge. And yeah, it's still roughly balanced. I think I would prefer white, if anyone, just because of the potential of the bishop and knight when they do improve later. But right now, black's pieces, they combine so well. And still, that pawn majority, the 2 versus 1, long term, that is something in the bank for Giri to hope for.
They're also very equal on the clock. Just, it feels like it's a little bit calm before the storm in this game. It just feels like it.
Yeah, I'm hoping Duda, I mean, he is a fighter. Actually, his online chess handle when he plays Blitz is Polish Fighter 3000.
Really?
Yeah, so he calls himself a fighter. So hopefully he won't do what Ding and Magnus did and just repeat the position 3 times and go for that draw. Hopefully he'll find a way to at least avoid the queen trade and keep the game alive. And Duda has to do that. I mean, if he doesn't win this game, I think he's got no more chances. I mean, he's lost 5 games already in this tournament, Duda, and he's really, really struggling.
His fighting chess index is a little bit over 63 out of 100. What is a good number, David? You know, this fighting chess index, it's very new to us, so it's still hard to know to evaluate what the numbers mean. 63.
Yeah, so it's out of 100, so that's decent in terms of attacking chess, kind of fighting chess at least. The top players in the tour that we've seen, they're slightly over 70. That means that they really push for every game, for every result, often playing long games to try and win. So I would say over 60 is decent, but over 70, that's really good in terms of fighting chess. So we'll get to know more about those fighting chess stats as the tour continues, as we get more of a sample size of games. But either way, Duda's score of 63 is decent, and he will hope to improve that. Meanwhile, I'm slightly surprised. Maybe Giri is playing for the win. Maybe he doesn't want the draw. Maybe he's smelling blood that Duda is not in form this tournament, and he's not chasing the white queen. Instead, he's going after that lonely white pawn on the left. Look at that black queen. She's lined herself up with the white king, but also hitting that white pawn. So, yeah, maybe Giri getting ambitious.
Do you like the decision?
I would be scared to play a move like that as black, just because I saw a safer option, and I would be scared of white's pieces suddenly kind of springing out of the box, the knight and bishop, as you mentioned, kind of joining the white queen in attack. But then again, if you're both getting low on time, it's kind of a tricky move. You are creating threats. I like it.
I don't like it at all. I think it would have been much safer to chicken out and just try to offer the trade of queens all the time. Because the kind of thing that I'm worried about is that the knight will just move itself away, and this is the key thing, I have a feeling it might anchor itself and sit on a central square protecting the bishop. And once it does this, so David can highlight where I want my knight to go. It wants to go to the E3 square. And once it does this, OK, so we're seeing it there. And once it's done this, protected the bishop, kind of solidified the placing of the king, then you can get on with the plan that I dreamt about all those moves ago, you know, creating some air for the king, moving the king into safety, and then just torturing black on the light squares. Yeah,
just to show the long-term plan, if white can get the king off the first rank, out of the eye line of the black queen, then suddenly this bishop is no longer pinned, it's free to enter the action, and it will have targets on the light squares. So, yeah, this will be a very weak pawn. We actually saw this pawn be a big weakness in previous days on the tour. And look at this. The white knight has found that square Jovanka mentioned. If we go to the game, actually, it has come at the cost of this pawn. Black has just gobbled up another pawn. So these are past pawns now. They're going to run down the board if they can. They're still far away from causing any danger. But white will bring the bishop into the attack. And already, another rhyme we've coined, knights on f5 will thrive. Yes. It's possible for white's knight to jump to this dream f5 square, and suddenly, look at this black king. There are no pieces around it to defend. And suddenly, the knight is attacking already, threatening to jump in with a check and what we call a fork, a double attack. But also, once the queen joins this knight, there are going to be some clear checkmating threats. 2 attacking pieces, no defending pieces around the black king. Yeah, it's a big, big risk that Giri has taken. I think Giri wants to win this game rather than just draw, but look at this, the white knight has indeed jumped forward, and suddenly this king is really hearing the warning signs.
Yeah, there's not only checkmating ideas in the air, but there's also a knight jumping into the e7 square to deliver what we call a fork. There would be
yeah. I think this is a game where it's, you know, for a beginner in chess, you can just sort of see the white pieces better placed. Like the black pieces on the edges, so scattered around. And it seems the white pieces are just working better together.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if the white bishop somehow joins the action as well, then that's why we say knights and bishops together are often better than a rook. So there's simply 2 of them. 2 pieces are better than 1. And alone, they're worth less than a rook. Together, they're worth much more. And Giri maybe suddenly realizing that there are a lot of threats to contend with. And he has to move either his rook or his king right now because of that knight check idea, the knight jumping in to attack them both at the same time. One of them has to move, but do you really want to move the black king? Doesn't look like many safe squares there. And if you move the black rook instead, where do you put it? You could swing it the whole way across, sitting next to the black king. That's a good defensive square, but white would be able to start creating some checkmate threats already with the white queen. And remember, queen and knight together are the dream attacking combo. The knight is the only piece that does stuff that the queen cannot.
Yeah. And the black queen, totally offside.
Yeah, that's another... OK, the black king has shuffled off to the corner, onto a dark square, slightly safer. But, yeah, that's one theme, again, we've seen throughout the Airthings.
Whoa!
That's one thing we've seen throughout the Airthings Masters. The black queen being offside leads to attacks. And, wow, look at this, a knight sacrifice by Duda. He is really working all the angles right now, and we have to show this on the board. This is a trick. The knight actually giving itself up for a key defensive pawn. But if the black king takes it, the sneaky idea is that the queen shuffles across with a check, but it's a double attack. Chess is all about double attacks. And next move, once the king moves out of the check, the rook simply drops off, and white has an extra bishop. Once it joins the action, it's going to be deadly. It will end up on a light square eventually, hitting the black king. So this move, this knight now is poisoned, and if you can't take it, your king is going to be doomed. Whatever you do now as black, if you try and bring the queen back into the defense, then the white knight steps back, and suddenly the king is vulnerable on the dark squares as well as the light squares. What a spot. What a tactic. What a trick by Duda.
Yeah, I loved your line. Working all the angles, and it's so true. You know, diagonals and those straight lines. But if I were in Anish's spot, I probably would capture the knight, and I would just take it, because this 3 is the magic number when it comes to checkmating attacks, and I don't want 3 pieces attacking me. So therefore, OK, he's gone for something. I was kind of hoping that the queen and bishop wouldn't coordinate well.
OK, instead, the black queen dropped back, but look at this, the white knight does simply retreat. The black queen is plugging the holes on the dark squares, but all white needs to do is give his king some breathing space, give it some fresh air. You don't want to move your bishop away and walk into some nasty back rank checkmates. The king has no escape squares now, so you'd have to drop your bishop back again. But once you give this king some breathing space, for example, pushing a pawn forward, next move, no matter what black... OK, he does this. No matter what black does, you bring your bishop into the attack. And now, if you move your knight out the way, again, there'll be deadly threats along this diagonal. And as Jovanka said, 3 is the magic number. There's 3 attacking pieces. There's only really 1 defender. So this is going to be winning. And these pawns are too slow. These black pawns, they take an age to march down the board. White's attack is far quicker.
Only red numbers on the black king's Airthings device then, I think.
Yeah, the CO2 levels around that black king are pretty high. And the CO2 levels around the white king have suddenly dropped with that breathing space that pawn move has just given it.
It's like opening a window, pushing your pawn, getting some luft around your king. And look at Jan-Krzysztof Duda. You know, he's been leaning back the whole game, looking quite chill. Now he's leaning forwards.
Yeah, you know, it's a huge change in body language, like you say, because before it looked like, OK, this wasn't my tournament, I'm just going to make some moves. And then suddenly, OK, maybe I can get back into it.
Yeah.
After all, it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Exactly, and 3 points for a win. It's going to take him to 12 points. It's not going to be over for Jan-Krzysztof Duda. He can still qualify for the knockout stage with a fantastic finish to the tournament, to the preliminaries.
And he's one of those players, for him it's all about momentum. We saw it in the World Cup. Once he gets 1 or 2 results, he continues rolling. Some other players, they're very consistent. Sometimes they'll make a draw, they'll be solid, and they'll take a win here, there. But Duda, once he wins one game, he often wins several in a row. So, OK, Black's still in big trouble here, but I'm just backtracking to that one moment. I said I liked the fighting spirit behind it, but it was that moment Giri stopped chasing the white queen. He had to continue that harassment of the white queen, try and get the queens off the board, because without queens, Black's king will never, ever get checkmated. So that's just instructive for everyone at home. If you're scared of an incoming attack, swap those queens off the board, and you'll be much safer. But Giri now, he's making some gestures, wincing. He's not happy at all. White's bishop can already join the action. There's not a rush. OK, it chooses slightly strange square, just holding up the advance of Black's pawns, but not an attacking square for that bishop yet.
I'm surprised by that one, actually. I thought that he would simply align the bishop and the queen, threaten checkmate.
Maybe we're too hasty. Maybe he's just playing the slow, patient game. He'll stop the advance of those black pawns. He'll improve maybe the white king, push some of those white pawns forward, and then he'll go for the black king. I'm surprised as well, I must admit. He's much more controlled than we are, but either way, still a strong position for White.
Intense. Well, the bar has gone slightly down, and it's jumping back up again. It's not over, I suppose, but Giri is fighting hard for a draw here.
Yep, it's not over, but then again, sometimes we talk about the evaluation bar. Sometimes it might say +5 for White, but it's only one move, only one opportunity. But this is the type of position, it says +2, +3, but it's a long-term advantage. Unless you make a huge mistake, it's going to stay around +1, +2, +3 for a long, long time. You still need to find the killer blow. That is the hard part. But, it's a long-term advantage for White.
And like you say, he has all the time in the world just to improve his bishop, not even improving. He can just move his bishop, move his knight, get those extra seconds on the clock. And Anish begging Duda for a queen trade, but of course, it's not going to happen.
Pigs will fly before Duda takes those queens off the board.
And with the queens on the board and only about a minute on the clock, I mean, there must be possible to blunder for both, I guess, in this position.
Definitely. That's the only thing that could tempt Duda to trade the queens, is that the risk of a blunder becomes a bit less. But then again, if the queens disappear, Black's 2 pawns, unrivaled 2 pawns on the left side, would start running down the board. So, partly for your own attack, partly just because the queen combines so well with minor pieces. He will keep the queens on. And look at this, he dives into the black position, attacking. We talked about isolated pawns. That black pawn next to the white queen is isolated, is a target now. Black's queen can defend it, but some big threats incoming. Okay, Jovanka, what do you think? The black queen will retreat?
Has to retreat. She has to start just doing some repair work and just filling in those holes, like you say. And I think Duda has his pick of moves. He can do whatever he likes. He can just retreat his queen and say, maybe I'm going to try a different direction, or he can try to improve the bishop.
Yeah, White's bishop looks nice and pretty, stopping the black pawns from moving, but it needs to join the attack. The white knight nicely placed as a both attacking and defensive piece. The white queen active, also very nicely placed, but the white bishop is the only one that's not really combining with the other 2 pieces. So how to improve that white bishop?
Less than 30 seconds for Jan-Krzysztof Duda. How is he under time pressure and with speed chess?
Yeah, he's decent. He's maybe not in the same bracket as Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura when it comes to 1 minute, 3 minute chess, but he's won some big blitz events. I think he came joint first at the World Blitz. He ended up losing the tiebreak there to Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He's came second in the World Blitz actually previously as well. So one of the best blitz players in the world. But obviously with 16 seconds, 18 seconds on your clock, it's not easy. Nobody can avoid mistakes in that type of situation. Look at the dance between the queens as well. Black begging, as Jovanka said, for that queen trade. Just chasing the white queen around the board. But no trade will ever, ever happen.
No.
And White's queen will just sidestep or retreat. Yep.
Yeah, it will retreat, and the knight will get ready to launch itself into the center square. So it has 8 squares available. 8 is a lot of squares, David.
8. 8 is a lot of squares. So that's why you called it an octo knight, right?
Yep.
knights in the middle of the board, they do have these tentacles, just 8 covering 8 squares. On the side of the board, they only cover 4. That's why we say knights in the room are dim. So white's knight nicely placed now, but could be even better placed in the middle. Yeah, so I'm expecting, well, I don't know what I'm expecting for Anish Giri. I barely see a move that defends here. You have to move maybe the black rook, I was going to say, attacking white's bishop, but Duda just exhaling there. Again, his kind of instincts that are tingling that there's a knockout blow. Maybe the white bishop just moves, just retreats.
Just retreats, maybe attacks the rook. And, yep.
Keeping things simple. And the black rook has to move now. Which direction is it going?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky, isn't it? Do you go on the aggressive, let's attack the queen? And he's done that, but I don't know. There's no coordination anymore. It's not defending the king.
Yeah, so for example, the back rank now, the 8th rank, the top row is vulnerable because the rook has evacuated it and black's king did get checked. It's now forced out of its hiding place, out into the open, and it's got to retreat now, back where it came from.
And now the knight will join into the action. It would launch itself on e5 and start looking at the f7 pawn. Look at it. It's going to fall. There's nothing for it.
Yeah, that black queen is hit. The black pawn, as you mentioned, is hit on the f7 square, the key square of f7 that we've mentioned a few times. I mean, black's rook could give itself up for the white knight, but the white knight protected by white's queen. And now black's queen forced off onto the edge. I mean, there's plenty of moves that I think are winning here. You can even just push a pawn up and attack the black queen, attack the black rook at the same time, a double attack.
Yeah, that's the move we want.
That's the move we see. And yeah, that's a fork. And Giri, he's about to lose his rook. He leans back, but he's not giving up yet.
Ooh.
This is good. We never want to see players give up. We want to see the checkmate. We want to see that end the game. So black's rook, it's gone crazy and sacrificed itself. It was dropping anyway. But on that note, Giri does resign. White's king was about to take that rook, or could even stepped up the board, and that would have been game over.
Wow.